Welcome to No Tourists Allowed, a podcast where two travel industry executives with a combined 71 years on the inside of travel and technology give up their secrets to do the thing everyone wants to do. Travel better, pay less, and see more of the world. Here are your hosts, Mike Putman and James Ferrara.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Putman.
And I'm James Ferrara. Welcome to No Tourists Allowed.
We've got a lot of good stuff to cover with you guys today, so thanks for tuning in. Just kind of wrapping up our summer season. We're going to take a few weeks off and start back up in early October. But it's been a really busy summer for me traveling. I know for you as well, James.
Absolutely. And Mike, when we come back in the fall, we've got an incredible lineup of topics and some guests on the podcast. So we're going to be bringing back some of the folks we didn't get in this past year. We've got a big travel editor coming. We've got the space travel people coming to join us. I've got a few other ideas up my sleeve, a few folks we want to talk to. I have an African travel specialist, kind of luxury safari specialist that I'd like to bring on. So, I'm really looking forward to getting out of summer mode and back into No Tourists Allowed mode. The beginning of October, yeah?
Yeah. And we both have a little bit of travel to do between now and then, and maybe we can share some of those stories when we return. I wanted to start off by putting up a question for you and myself to discuss a little bit. And it's something that I'm sure you've heard, I've heard many times from listeners or clients. And the question is, should I really trust using all the travel AI apps out there to plan my vacation? And there's a ton of them. And as investors and as people who are got our finger on the pulse in the travel business, we see these. I probably see a new one every week coming around, and people looking to raise money or people wanting to partner with our businesses. And I'll serve it up to you, James. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, as you know, I have a personal hashtag that I've used for years, which is hashtag don't ask a machine. And that's because I believe that travel is very human. It's very emotional. I think it is very opinionated. It is very customized for people. It is sometimes the most significant expense you can have in a year. And it's precious time with your family. It's precious time away from work. And for all of those reasons, I don't think you trust a machine with those kinds of arrangements. That said, I think it's a human to human thing. When I say luxury, I want to know the person I'm talking to understands what I mean by luxury. It's not just a word, right? Luxury to me is different than luxury to you. I want the care. I want the personal attention, all of that. But technology changes. And I'm also not a person to fear technology. I believe you seize technology and you make the most out of it. So we're in a world now where I think technology can do some of the work. And really, for me, it's a matter of what stage you're using the technology at. I think at the beginning, this kind of technology, AI, can save you time and save you effort in narrowing down your interests and your choices. But I think ultimately, your choices need to be made with a professional travel advisor, collaborating with another human being who understands you and cares about you and will ultimately make the arrangements. I don't think you should go it alone with just the technology.
Well, I definitely concur. There's different parts of the travel experience that AI does handle or says they're going to handle for you. But I've seen some interesting information about these recommendation engines, and that's kind of the first part of what we're talking about. So these recommendation engines, oftentimes you'll ask it a question, Where should I go for a unique experience, or things of that nature. And and while they'll come back, and I've seen some of the results come back, and they come back with probably I would say a quality response, but the questions are just not qualified enough. Saying, I want to go somewhere interesting. So I happened to look at one today, and the interesting places it recommended were Bhutan, which Bhutan's got it is an interesting place, but it's got a lot of issues, and there's a lot of people that won't go there because of their political or sociological views. Georgia, not Georgia as the state, but Georgia as the country, and some other things that were just, without asking, a human or an agent would ask the next question. If I said I want to go somewhere interesting, then as an agent, what would you say? What would be your next question, James?
How adventurous are you? And what is your appetite for risk?
Yeah, exactly.
I would qualify you in a way. And the art of this new technology is really in the prompt, right? That's what we're talking about, is in asking the question and prompting a response in a very specific way. And it takes a bit of art, and I don't think most people are prepared for that yet.
And I don't think that the guys who are computer programmers who are trying to solve these things are the right people to solve it. They might be the right people to code, but I don't think they're the right people to ultimately provide the direction needed for booking something so complex. But I think systems will get there eventually, but they're certainly not there today. I also happened to run into an AI agent this week, and as I was reviewing that opportunity, the way an agent works is it's a deeper level of just the single prompts. It actually learns about your likes and dislikes, and it will actually, some will go to the end and actually make a transaction for you if you give them authorization and you give them your credit card number or allow them to learn your credit card number. So this was pretty spooky, but I went through a demo this week, and it was a simple booking a trip from San Francisco to New York. And when I say a trip, just an airline ticket, and the number of steps that it went through, and just candidly, the number of flaws that I saw in it, and thinking that some people are already moving to using these AI agents to buy things on their behalf and so forth, seemed a little bit daunting to me. I think this is where being an early adopter might be at your own peril, because there's a lot that can go wrong with these things, especially if you give them access to utilize your own credit card number. But they have gotten the agents far enough where they can go and make purchases, not just for travel, but for other things with some simple instructions. So I would say buyer beware.
Yeah, I mean, the early results I've seen lack, in the best way I could put it, I would say lack nuance. But in maybe a harsher review, they lack some reality, right? So the earliest products that we looked at together, Mike, remember, they would come back with suggested itineraries that were really impossible to fulfill. They'd have you crisscrossing, Venice with all its crowds like 2 or 3 times in a day to try to get in like 3 activities that no travel agent or tour guide would recommend you try to do. I mean, it's just impossible to get done. But the systems didn't seem to understand the wait times or the travel times, or what made sense to do on arrival day when you might be a little bit tired, or on departure day when you have to get to the airport. There are those kinds of, I mean, it isn't enough to call them nuances, really. There are those logistics of travel that it's very difficult for these algorithms to understand. Now, we're already into kind of a second generation, if you will, and I've seen improvement around this, but still not enough to trust on its own. So when my travel agents at my company come to me, and they're travel advisors, really, I should say, because that's the point, right? Is they're using their expertise and their knowledge to give you good advice for travel. So the travel advisors come to me and say, will I be replaced by AI? And my answer to them is no, you cannot be replaced by AI with all of your human compassion and understanding. You can't be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by another travel advisor using AI. So AI is a tool both for travel advisors and for customers to get us part of the way, to save some time, to save some effort, to narrow the field of choices. Absolutely. But then either you personally, as a very informed traveler, have to get in there and make some very human decisions, or you need a human travel advisor to help you do it too.
That's a good wrap up for that conversation. And moving on to other stories, there was an interesting article in the Washington Post this week about flight attendants, and the title of the article was "Barely Surviving." Some flight attendants are facing homelessness and hunger. Which is really, it's unfortunate. But there, on one side, I mean, says, this is a supply and demand thing, right? We've got people growing up, or especially young ladies growing up, wanting the glamorous life of being a flight attendant and traveling the world for free. And you probably have an oversupply of that. The airlines understand it, and see waiting lists of people that want to take a job, and therefore willing to pay kind of bottom of the barrel rates to get these folks in. And oftentimes these flight attendants have to spend their own time getting to trainings and actually doing their own trainings before they're certified, and with no compensation. But the gist of the article was, it was really hard to be a flight attendant, at least a beginning flight attendant. I know as you progress and gain experience, they make quite a bit more money. But it's saying that the projected pay of a first year flight attendant's $23,000 a year before taxes and insurance.
Yeah, that's poverty.
Yeah, it is poverty. Exactly. It is. And so it's talking about a lot of these flight attendants are, working, a 7-hour shift. And by the way, in general, flight attendants don't get paid unless they're flying. So if their flight gets delayed, if they're waiting, they have to board early to make sure everything's in order. Some of that is done without pay. I think they get paid for some of it. But it's really flight time mainly that they're getting paid for. And if they work 7 hours and they're making $23,000 a year, is $11.50 an hour, so they're making $80 a shift in that example. You just can't live off of that. So a lot of them are getting off a 7-hour shift and then going to work driving an Uber, as an example, for 12 hours until their next shift comes aboard, and then they go straight into flying again. And these are people that are, have a huge responsibility for our safety and comfort as we, fly on these planes all over the world and all over the U.S.
Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah.
Mike,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, look, the whole ecosystem mystifies me, right? Because, first of all, the idea that it's a glamorous job at all anymore. I mean, yeah, in the 1960s, sure, people were dressing up in suits and ties to fly on a plane, and it was only very wealthy people who could, very affluent people who could fly, and it was a whole different experience. Now, I uh, observe that as cabin crew, you spend a lot of your time dealing with abuse. So it does not seem to me to be a glamorous job, and certainly not for low pay. But I do agree that the pull has a lot to do with travel. I know people who work for the airlines, and the truth is, if they log like one shift in a month, that maintains their status to fly free and to deadhead and to, stand by on flights and to travel the world for next to nothing. They get companion passes so they can bring people with them. And so there are a lot of perks here that are clearly part of the story. And it's the aspiration to advance and to become a more senior person. And then you get to pick and choose. And then you get the more glamorous jobs, which are like the um, international flights, right? Same with pilots, too. You work your way up from a regional jet service up to an international pilot who's like the sort of top of the food chain. Um, but I don't like to hear of anyone being underpaid. And I think you get what you pay for when it comes to um, employees. I think that an unhappy employee cannot provide good customer service. And that's part of what's wrong with the airlines today. And I know I'm an airline basher. I'm always here, bashing the airlines. I'm surprised I haven't been, run out of town on a rail. But um, part of the problem is they have unhappy employees.
But you talked about we both talked about as these flight attendants gain experience, they have the opportunity to make more money. Here's what was really interesting about the article. Again, this is reported by the Washington Post, is that hourly rates increase by experience until you hit what they consider top year ceiling, which based on the airlines is between 13 and 21 years. So once you provide 13 or 21 years of service, then you reach top pay. But here's the top pay by airline, according to this article. At Frontier Airline, top pay, this is somebody with between 13 and 20, or at least 13 years of experience, $54,000. Top pay at JetBlue, $58,167. Alaska, $60,000. And they're all about the same from there, with the exception of Delta. Delta's top pay is $71,000. But still, I mean, could you imagine working somewhere for 20 years and and it's not an easy job. These folks are on their feet, and like you said, they're dealing with it's a different class of people. And I don't mean that in the wrong way, but years ago when you didn't have to try to carry all your bags on, and they weren't selling airline tickets for $100 one way across country. They pulled a lot of people off buses and trains and put them on airplanes because of the cost. And so, and sometimes people get sour because they have a bad experience, and and maybe rightfully so.
Well, listen, our job is, I think, in some way to make travel appealing. And here we are. We sometimes talk about the underbelly of travel, which is mostly the airlines. And, it's the reality, though. We're being real with everyone. I would say my advice here is just moderate your expectations when it comes to airline travel, right? I mean, it just is the bus travel of the new world.
And for our listeners, just be patient. I mean, understand where these people are coming from. They might be a cool job to get to fly everywhere, but if you can't afford to be anywhere and you're living out of your car like some of these poor folks are, just be respectful. Give them a little more leeway if they make a bad decision, and just don't fly off the handle like we see on social media of these passengers.
That's awful. Well, I'll tell you though, if you play it right, the cabin crew can be the source of really good information. First of all, most of them are frequent travelers. So if you're heading to Paris, that cabin crew probably flies to Paris constantly and spends a lot of time in Paris, overnighting or spending weekends there. And they can be a great source of information about the destination, right? And fun places to go and great places to eat and so on. But recently, there was another article that shows you how they can be of value in another way. And that was cabin crew giving advice on what not to eat on the airplane. what food offered on the airplane you should not consume. And I thought, of course, they wouldn't give their names because they have to be careful. But I thought there was some very interesting advice there, and the major one had to do with the water supply on the plane. If you're being served bottled water, that's great, but you should see it come out of the bottle. In other words, they should pour it right there in the aisle. If they come down the aisle with a tray of plastic cups of water, you should ask if it's bottled water or not, because the planes are equipped with big tap water tanks. Those tanks are filled through a certain port on the outside of the plane, and they then hold water, and then water is circulated through pipes in the plane to the taps in the galleys. And according to the flight crews, these ports and tanks and pipes are not adequately maintained. They're not cleaned on a regular enough basis, especially if you're flying international carriers whose standards are different. They're held to different operational standards. There's just too much opportunity for the water to develop impurities, bacteria, and so on. And this is true of coffee and tea served on planes, because those are definitely made with the tap system water. And, in the words of these flight attendants and cabin crew, they would never drink coffee or tea from the plane. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, and these I think there's a cross contamination possibility too, because these ports are very close. The ports that where water comes out of the plane from, you guys can figure out the reason why it's coming out. But yeah, you want to be really careful. But James, I'm interested, were there any other food items that they suggested not to eat, and why?
Apparently, refrigeration and cooking are very limited on the planes. The space is limited, the equipment is limited. So, a specific food that I thought was interesting and is often appealing to me are these little like cheese and fruit trays. I don't like to eat the unhealthy stuff. Like, I'm not going to get a burger on the plane or eat chips. That's not me. But I will eat like a fruit and cheese platter because that sounds healthy to me. But what I learned from this article is that because the refrigeration is limited, they're actually using shelf stable products like fruit and cheese that's highly processed so that it doesn't have to be refrigerated, and actually very unhealthy for you. Not because of any danger in the way it's served. The danger is from the processing. That part of it is not good for you. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing is they said they just can't control cooking temperature, and things tend to, so any entree that is like uh, a steak or fillet of beef or a fillet of fish or chicken or something is likely to get grossly overcooked. It's just the only way they can do it on there. And so they suggested you shy away from those. And again, that's not necessarily dangerous. It's just not a pleasant experience, right?
Yeah. This on the last couple of international flights, I've had some really nice fish dishes.
Well, international tends to be better, right? So the fares are higher, so they can spend more money per person on the food. And it's been a long time since I've seen one of these reports, but I have seen in the past reports of listing the airlines by how much money per passenger they spent on food. And on the international side, of course, it's the big Eastern airlines like Cathay Pacific and Singapore and Etihad, the Middle Eastern airlines that are, usually come out at the top with the most expensive ingredients and the best food. But domestically, again, it's been a while, but Delta always used to be at the top. And by like several dollars more per person spent on the ingredients for Delta food. I don't know if that's still true, but Delta is a quality airline for sure.
Yeah, and I don't even think there's meals served anymore domestically unless you're in first class.
Well, so I just revealed my traveling habits.
Well, so what kind of plans you got coming up for the next travel plans for the next couple of weeks, Gene?
Well, I just came back from Orlando. Quick trip down to Orlando, overlooking Disney Springs and Epcot at the famous Marriott World Center, which is an enormous hotel with a big um, water park and laser show at night. And I was there for an event, which is why you would go to the Marriott World Center. But uh, a passing thunderstorm, which was biblical in proportion, was much more interesting than the laser show because there was lightning all over the place. And it was raining so hard that you couldn't see. You know, it was one of those storms, just sheets and sheets of rain. But I was in and out very quickly in Orlando and had one of those annoying experiences. Even though I'm clear and TSA and all that, I get on the line, and Orlando can be it's like Atlanta can be very busy airport with long lines. So I'm relieved to get on my Clear Plus line, and it looks like I'm going to blow right through. And of course, something happens with the machine, breaks down. Managers are coming over. The manager decides to make it a teachable moment so pulls the whole crew together around the screen and has a manual out and is pointing out things. Meanwhile, we're all standing there literally for 20 minutes, no movement. And I'm watching people who did not have Clear or TSA on some other lines just passing me by. So that was a little frustrating. I am leaving. I'm going up to Boston for the weekend. I know maybe not so exciting to all of you, but I happen to like Boston a lot. My son is going back to university, so spending the holiday weekend up there. And the interesting thing there is finding the right hotel room, because we like to have my son with us. We want a suite, and finding a suite that has like two full bathrooms, and sleeping for three adults like that is much harder than you might think. The it, and it it's interesting how detailed you sometimes need to get about the accommodations, but how hard it can be to get those details, right? It's not clear on the hotel's website if that couch is actually a fold out bed, or it's not clear if there's a second bathroom, or if the bathroom is a full bathroom. Like, we have a lot of work to do still in the travel industry around um, standardizing this data around hotel accommodations. And even if you're going directly to the hotel's website, I mean, you still literally have to pick up the phone like it's 1970, and talk to someone and ask questions. And sometimes you're talking to a central reservation number, and even they can't answer the question.
Yeah, oftentimes I would say.
So that was my takeaway from this weekend. And then I'm getting on a cruise. On next Saturday, I am getting on Princess Cruise to Canada and New England, which is an itinerary I've always wanted to do, and goes up to Halifax, Nova Scotia, and St. John's,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, and Newport, Rhode Island, and Maine. Um, so I'm really looking forward to that. Of course, you go in the fall, September, October, when the leaves are changing far up north like that. So it's very pretty. And it's a little different than going to the Caribbean and sun and fun and sweating and beach and all that. It's cool sweater weather.
So how did they get around the, and I forget the name of the rule that wouldn't allow foreign flagged ships to stop more than once in the U.S. without an international port?
It's a good question. I know that Princess owns the cruise ships that cruise Hawaii, and they are actually U.S. flagged so that they can stop in multiple ports. This way, on this one, it may be that they're hitting internet, they stop at one domestic port, then hit an international port, and then hit another domestic port on the way back down. That's allowed. You've got to hit an international port in between. This is the Jones Act you're referring to.
I'm impressed you knew that. Good. Charlie will be proud of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. And Princess has great food on board and really looking forward to a lot of fun. What about you?
I got just a couple of industry events to travel to, and then a golf tournament, but nothing terribly exciting.
And then we're going to Sorrento together in the fall.
Small group of 200 or 300 people.
Flying into Naples, so we'll be in southern Italy, which is where my part of my family comes from, and a really spectacular place. So I'm looking forward to that. And I don't know, I think I have a couple of trips in between. I've got London, I've got Napa Valley, actually, to one of the auberge resorts later on in September, October. So it's fall in the travel industry. We're out on the road a lot in the fall, folks, and so you'll be hearing from Mike and I from all over the place.
October, November are busy travel months. Well, great. Well, let's wrap up for today's show, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in and being a faithful listener and follower. Please tell your friends and families to join, and they can find us at notouristallowed.com or wherever they get their podcast. And for now, I'm signing off, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again in October.
Thank you, everybody.